Hello and welcome to another UTC Creator Commentary track. I'm Jim Whaley, and today we'll be looking at Chapter 13, Double Date. A little pulling back the curtain to start us off. I'm recording this commentary very late in the game. It is May 2023. This chapter started releasing in 2021. So I'm actually working on the final pages of Phase 3 right now. And so a lot is happening between the pages we're going to be looking at in this commentary and the pages that I've got going on here. A lot of it feeds into each other, but I'm going to keep the spoilers very light. So normally, these commentaries, I normally advise you to read the entire chapter for that particular commentary before watching the video. This is going to be a little bit different, and I'll explain why. I recommend that you read Chapter 13 and all of Chapter 14 before watching this commentary. And the reason for that being, there's a lot of things that I talk about behind the scenes about like my decisions creative wise in terms of like where the characters are going, what happens in this chapter, and how that differs from my original plan for this chapter and for Phase 3 in general. And I really can't talk about that without spoiling some things for Chapter 14 here. It would be more relevant for me to talk about them in this commentary than to wait to talk about them in Chapter 14 because of like a lot of the context of this particular chapter. Like this was like there were a lot of changes related to this chapter in particular that steered the rest of Phase 3 in ways that we're going to explore a bit. So there's your spoiler warning. Please read chapters 13 and 14 before watching this commentary. I'll give you 5 more seconds to navigate to another tab, another YouTube video, or, katomics.com/UTC to read that comic, if you would like to read that now. All right, so we're going to get right into it now. This is the third chapter of Phase 3, and it's the first chapter of the phase that's actually like quote-unquote normal in terms of like its format and structure. So our first chapter, which was Class Warfare Part 2, that was tying up a massive cliffhanger from Phase 2. The comic was 36 pages compared to the planned 24 pages, and obviously a whole lot of stuff went down in that one, so that kind of broke the mold of what UTC really was up until that point. And then immediately after that, we went into the Mother Trilogy, which was designed as a breather issue. Breather chapter, I should say, not issue, that's physical copies, but anyway, nomenclature aside, the idea for Mother Trilogy being that we just went through a lot of heavy stuff. Let's take a look at some what's going on in the day-to-day lives of some minor characters and have some little short jaunts in the UTC universe. So that helped reset things a bit, and now we're getting into like the regular rhythm of what Phase 3 is. So chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all back to like the normal length of chapters. The pages vary a little bit between 20 and 24 pages, but there's no like massive sprawling event, like massive things that make each individual chapter super huge. So like it's in terms of like an episodic storytelling structure, which is what Phase 2 had. We're here again now. And in that sense, this is also a way to sort of ease us back into the normal pace of things. So we're back focusing on our main characters. The difference here is, and I try to convey this in the cover that we're looking at, the chapter is focusing more on the internal struggles of our main characters. The transformations that they're dealing with are having new, unexpected issues that they are having to navigate on top of the stuff they were already coping with. So some things that the characters were already like, all right, I'm used to it now. They're thrown for a loop again, and things where it's just like things are steadily getting worse. Especially in Noah's case, he's continuing to devolve into a salamander, and all of the physical limitations that he's encountering as a result of that's brought front and center here. So the idea going into this chapter, and part of the reason this chapter exists, is to bring things home. To, like, we spent all of phase 2, most of phase 2, focusing on other people's problems, other characters, one-off characters or minor characters, recurring characters, having a out-of-control experiment, or some wacky thing just happens and they have to use science to fix it. But we're not really tackling the fact that Cass is a goat, the fact that Noah's a salamander, Flint's a squirrel. Well, we tackled Flint as a squirrel in chapter 9. But the idea of a lot of things have been distracting the characters, and that there's meta content here, because a lot of those were distracting me as a storyteller as well. I may have mentioned in previous commentaries how UTC was meant to be just these random transformations and the main characters learning how to cope with what's going on. And I got sidetracked with a lot of like, well, what if these characters all shrink? And what if there's a rebellion in the school? And what if there's, what's going on with the principal? How's she dealing with being a kid? But we're not really tackling the fact that, Cass's cure is still elusive. Noah doesn't seem to be making any progress on his own cure, despite the fact that we're seeing him change continuously over the course of these 2 months that we've passed so far in UTC. Almost 2 months have gone by the time we get to this storyline. And, well, more like a month and a half. It's the first week of December in the storyline here, and the series started in mid-October. So, questions have to be answered in terms of like, well, what's going to happen to them? Are like, maybe they are going to stay as a goat and or a salamander for the rest of the series run, the rest of their lives, but like, we don't know that for sure. Can we get some closure on that? Or will one or both of them transform back? Or will they turn into something else entirely, or shift subtly? Like, we haven't gotten closure. And while we obviously aren't going to get closure in this chapter, this is a way of sort of bringing that back to the forefront, acknowledging, okay, look, a lot of weird stuff's been going on, but these characters have their own internal struggles that they've got to deal with, whether they've intentionally ignored them or unintentionally. In Noah's case, it's been intentionally ignoring. In Cass's case, it's more been unintentionally, because she's sort of, at this point, done everything she can try to do. But, like, let's actually have them deal with that. And one way to force them to deal with that is to just see how these transformations are affecting their own lives. Just normal things that we take for granted. For instance, being able to go on a date in public. So this is the story of how they explore that. The first time that they've actually had to deal with a completely mundane situation while tackling unexpected new aspects of their respective transformations. So this cover symbolizes a lot of what I just said. The symbols on here, I mean, I'm not going to go through every single like bit and piece. Like, a lot of it's to be inferred, but the fact that Cass's eyes are focused straight on a clock symbol, where she's looking at, look, I've been a goat for so long, and I'm really sick of this. It's about time I did something to change that. And she's also thinking about Noah in terms of his time. His time's running out. He's turning more and more into a salamander. It's showing no signs of stopping. It's making things harder for him to exist, to even go outside in the cold. So, like, that's where she's focused. Meanwhile, Noah's eye line is focused on a salamander footprint and a hoof print, and they're both facing the same direction. This is the only place on the cover that they're placed facing the same direction. So he's more focusing on his relationship with Cass as they exist in these forms. And he's ignoring the clock, which is directly in front of his face. So I did a few other things, like in terms of placing all these symbols, but those are the main ideas here. So like an abstract cover that gets at the ideas that the chapter is going to be exploring. And as far as, obviously it's a pretty simple cover in terms of technical execution, but I was happy to like spend some extra time with the gloss on Noah's bodysuit. The idea that he actually, his body's covered in mucus, as salamanders would be, to protect his skin. And so real clothes would chafe on him and get really messy. So we've seen over the past several issues, he's wearing this black latex bodysuit. So I liked the opportunity here to just really up the gloss on it, take some extra time that I don't normally have when I draw him on, tons of panels on a page, to get that in. So that was nice. I like covers in that they really help me talk myself into going a little bit beyond in terms of rendering things. So that's the deal with this cover. So getting into it, the initial scene here is something I should have learned how to do a lot earlier than I ended up doing as a storyteller, is to set the stage with a scene that isn't necessarily completely made of exposition, but has just enough exposition to help catch readers up on where these characters are right now in the timeline, what they're thinking, what their focus is on, and also just set the mood of the chapter. Cass looking at her reflection in the first panel is like she's saying no to Flint's idea of her growing her hair out. But the way I drew it was specifically we're looking through her eyes. She's looking at herself directly, and she's seeing her goat visage in the mirror, and she is so sick of seeing this. And obviously she passes it off as, even here she's smirking, she's cutting her hair, she's one of the few things she can do to assert dominance over this form that she has no choice in inhabiting is to be able to cut her hair and dye her hair and do other things with her aesthetic appearance. But really, she's disgusted every time she looks in the mirror. And this nope is layered. It's not just directed toward Flint trying to convince her not to cut her hair and do what Flint wants and look the way Flint wants her to look as opposed to the way she wants herself to look. She's also saying nope to herself. She's saying it's a verbal act of defiance combined with the physical act of defiance of cutting her own hair that insists on growing all the time and annoying the heck out of her. So there is that going on there. Things like that, I get it's just one of those things where I don't often stop to think really about what exactly is going through the character's head. I do it every so often, and so there are some chapters where I'm better at doing that than others. Sometimes I just get focused so much on driving the plot forward, I forget about these more human, for lack of a better word, moments. And so, like, things like this, I really liked having this page, even as simple as this page is, because it does get us back on track in terms of like the brother-sister dynamic that they've got going on here. One loves it, one hates it. That was like the original premise for Cass and Flint as characters in UTC, and we haven't really explored that in a while. So I was happy to be able to do that, and also foreshadowing what's about to happen on the next page, but also reminding people, since it's been a while since we addressed it, Cass's goatee is permanent. Morty programmed it to grow back instantly, or close to that, whenever she cuts it. So it always grows back to a certain length. And so getting Flint to prompt her to cut it off and demonstrate this again, the last time we saw this happen was in Chapter 4, the last chapter of Phase 1, which came out in 2008-2009. So this is a way of being like, all right, remember, this is the thing she's stuck with. She can't cut this off. And that's one other way of just being like, all right, that's the thing we're going to be dealing with in this chapter, and we're not going to address it later. It's not gonna be like, well, she hates the goatee so much. Why doesn't she just cut it along with the rest of her fur and hair? She can't, and this is why. So on this page, yeah, I really love drawing long hair. I can't stress that enough. So like this has been something I've been looking forward to doing for a long time, having Cass's winter coat grow in, and the sight gag of it, and the silliness of it. It's just really fun, and I went extra detailed on the expression and stuff too, because I like this scene a lot. This this panel is almost completely copy and pasted from the original, or no? Oh, sorry, no. I redrew Cass in silhouette in bed, but I copied the turtles on a kayak poster from the original that's in chapter 2, where we see Cass as a goat for the very first time. She wakes up in bed, and there's the silhouette. So I'm calling back to that scene here, and I didn't want to. I liked the way I'd originally drawn the turtles on a kayak poster, even though it was so long ago. I liked the look of it. So since I was referencing that scene anyway, using the exact same angle, I pulled that in. But the art was actually cut off right about here, I think. So like the top part of the turtles you didn't actually see. So when I copied the line art into this page, I ended up having more of a vertical thing than I expected, so I had to actually draw in a little bit more of the poster. I really should just draw the whole thing at some point, but no. Okay, so yeah, that was that. I really enjoyed drawing the detail of her muzzle. I used to get very anxious about drawing facial close-ups because I don't like adding extra details to a face. The more lines in cartooning, the more lines you add to a face, the more withered it looks, the older the person looks, the uglier someone looks, things like that. And some artists are better at mitigating those surface presumptions than others. But this is like given the extreme stare of this and how she's really, really pissed off. So I did go overboard with the lines and stuff for that. But normally I try and shy away from like really, really big close-ups like that. But yeah, anyway. Okay, and then this panel. So given my page budget, quote unquote, I didn't have enough space in the chapter to have too long of a exposition dump for this, to begin this chapter off. So we have this like 2.5 page scene. Is it 2.5 pages? No, it's a page and a half. I had to take two and a half to 3 pages worth of script and condense it down to just this page and half of the next page. But it's another one of those things where it's like, I gotta make sure I don't stretch these pages. I cannot stretch these issues super long. So I kept myself within a specific budget for pages. And I'm like, it would be really nice for us to see just how long Cass's hair actually is down. Like, I was gonna have the top half of this page be just everybody's standing in the living room, and we just see her hair spread across the floor. Like, it's about 10 feet. Canonically, it really is only 10 feet. It looks longer here because I've drawn it longer for the page borders and stuff. But the idea is it's just really freaking long. And turning it into a thing where I'm like, I don't have the space to have this big establishing shot. I've got too much dialogue. I've trimmed the dialogue down as much as I can. I really just need to get going with this. So I turned the idea of an establishing shot into the panel borders. So that was really fun to do. It's an experimental type of thing that UTC doesn't normally afford me as an artist. So that was a cool way to do it. And I just think she looks damn adorable here. The exposition here is, again, reiterating things that we've covered back in phase 1. Morty and Cass just sort of remind the viewer and themselves about like what's going on with her DNA. Why does her DNA different from Flint's DNA? Why the nanobots behave differently? Why her hair is growing so fast? So that we could get caught up with like the predicament and understand exactly where we're at here. There's a little bit of new information. Because Morty says Noah and I explored trying to do to you what Flint did to himself back in Chapter 9, Fur Will Fly, when he mutated himself further. But that was a one-way trip in the wrong direction, so we can't do it to you without endanger. Even if we could do it to you, it would get you less than what you want. We would turn you more into a goat. And a lot of this conversation could have been trimmed if it was just relegated to this Double Date chapter, because a lot of this doesn't really come up again in Double Date, but a lot of this does come up in chapter 14 when Cass is explaining, at the beginning of chapter 14, Cass explains to everybody her plan to cure herself. A lot of this information I put here so we didn't have to put it into the next chapter. This sort of helps spread out the exposition a bit, and it's just another way of helping to connect these chapters a little bit more, understand that what level set where Cass is at right now, so we don't have to re-explain this in one more chapter. This part with the granola bar. Cass is eating this granola bar. I put this in because a reader, after the previous page was released, I was making, as usual, I make these pages in real time as they get released. So like when Monday's page comes out, I'm just starting to write and draw the next, like to finalize the dialogue for, if I haven't already written it, and then start drawing the next page during the week that previous page came out. So that is bad in terms of like if something unexpected happens in my life, I have to delay the page. But it's good in that I get real-time feedback from all of you listeners, all of you readers, and that helps me make the comic better week by week, page by page. And this is one example of that. A reader saw Cass, with all this hair and was like, well, that had to come from somewhere. Like, there's a scientific explanation for everything that happens in UTC. It's not magic. So all of that mass had to come from somewhere. And Cass's own metabolism, this would be drawing from all of her energy, body mass, all that other stuff, her muscles, her fat tissue. Like, how is she not, dying right now with all of this extra unnecessary hair growth? Where did that come from? And I throw in this line about her being like, I guess that explains why I've had such an appetite lately. Like, this panel here, I threw that in to the conversation specifically because of that reader feedback comment on the previous page. And what I like more about it is that you could even infer that Cass's line in the Mother trilogy, where we see Cass eating a bowl of granola, that's the first time we've seen her eat in a while. I think, if ever. I'm not sure if we've ever seen her eat anything before that. But the fact that we were just seeing her eat breakfast in the previous chapter, that was just supposed to be a normal breakfast. It wasn't meant to set up this idea that she's been eating more lately. But I like how it dovetails with that, so it makes it look like I planned it all along, kind of. You could infer that. But no, I'm blowing this wide open. That was not it. I hadn't thought about it until a reader made me think about it. But it was a great addition for sure. The choice to do so the parents helping out here, I really wanted them to be as supportive as they possibly could. we've seen them be conflicted about their children's transformations. We've seen them be supportive or just be neutral in terms of like, okay, you're a goat and you're a squirrel. Like, that's just, we're still a family. It's all right, fine. But here they're really being completely active in helping Cass's date go off without any more hitches. So, it was really fun to just be like, all right, so mom and dad to the rescue. They're gonna fix her up. And it didn't make into the script because I've already had too much exposition. But Leon's the one who created these leather boots, shoe, like hoof coverings, essentially, for Cass. He made those. And the fact that she slips on the carpet here, that wouldn't have happened with her regular hooves. She navigates the carpet just fine on her normal hooves. They're made for that, and they're not made for carpet, but you know what I mean. Like, it's a texture. Her hooves can do very well on textured things, but the fact that she's in these slippery boots, and even though they've got treads, the treads are brand new and like squeaky clean leather soles on a carpet, not great. Especially when your legs already aren't formatted to navigate a human stairwell anyway. Oh, sorry, I just kicked the microphone stand on accident. I hope that didn't make any big noise on the camera or the microphone. So Cass blames her goat legs here, but the actual implication is she doesn't want her dad to be insulted because he spent time working on these boots, and so even though she's completely aware that it was the boots that helped her slip and fall and in this embarrassing situation, she's not about to put it on her dad that this moment just happened. So that's one subtle thing. It's really, really, really subtle. So that's why I wanted to call it out here in this commentary. And do I have something to say about Noah? No. Nope. Okay. So this page was an adventure. I probably spent 5 hours coloring this page. Usually I only spend 3 to 4 hours. And yeah, I mean, I hope it speaks for itself. The visual shift in terms of like reflective color, cast lights, and things like that. It's very, like, we went from this really almost completely flat cell shading look to this, and it's only on this page. I wasn't really sure how this would be received. No one really like mentioned too much. I think I got 1 or 2 compliments. Thank you for that. Whoever wrote those. But like otherwise, it didn't seem like we were suddenly in another comic or anything, which is what I kind of worried about. I had a lot of fun doing it this way. I talked a little bit about adding more atmosphere to vis-a-vis the colors when we looked at the morning scene in the previous chapter with Cass and Billy in the kitchen. The aforementioned getting granola scene. And this was another chance for me to be like, all right, I got to push this and do some extra stuff. So like I tried to capture like an early December kind of look here. There's a lot of like the snow that's fallen. Like they're going into town, so a lot of the snow's been carted away. That's fallen during class warfare. That snowstorm that came in. A lot of it, what's left, the sun has melted, and now it's just sort of all like pooling water in the streets, and there's reflectiveness, and there's tire marks and stuff like that. I learned a lot about drawing a city street here. It's not much, but this took me a while. And also, it's so hard to do interior car scenes. So I was happy the fact that this takes place at night, so I didn't have to like draw in the whole car frame every single time and stuff. This scene was originally... Alright, so moving away from the art and talking about more of the scene, this was originally going to be on the street as they walked up to the Allium restaurant. And they were originally meeting up with Ash and Demetrius outside and having this like 4-person conversation. But I just couldn't quite get it right. Nothing felt right about how the scene was going. And I can't remember exactly at what point I thought, well, put Cass and Noah in a car on their own and make that the scene. But once that idea ended up, once that idea just like planted itself in my head, this scene came about, and it works a whole lot better than anything I was trying to write before. There was some exposition about how Ash's uncle owns the Allium, which we find out later in this chapter. I was originally going to mention that right up front. The fact that Ash had already told his uncle that they were coming, and had gotten, had been like, hey, look, I'm bringing some animal friends. Is that okay? And things like that. And the fact that Ash is connected like that. We've never established that before. So that was kind of a lot of the exposition that was going to happen in the scene. Now this turns it around, and instead of being exposition, it's all just seeing Cass and Noah organically have a conversation with each other, and having to dance around the weirdness of this, the awkwardness of this, and also by placing them in the car, I inadvertently got the opportunity to bring up another aspect about their transformations, which is the fact that they're physically incompatible when it comes to climate. Noah has to keep the temperature warm so that he doesn't start shutting down. And Cass is covered in wool, and she's wearing a wool tux. So, like, she's got much more clothes than she would ideally have. So the fact that that gives them something to talk about in the car that makes things awkward. That gives them this, like, really awkward moment to share. And this was the page where I'd originally, up until I wrote this page, when it finally came together, I was like, I really don't want to focus on the romantic aspect of these two. I'm terrible at writing romance stories. I think a lot of romance is, like, cliche. I don't like sugarcoating things. I don't like, I just don't want a lovey-dovey kind of relationship. I've never enjoyed writing a couple in love, because I just feel like I don't know how to write that. But creating this scene here, I was like, oh wow, I can bring out aspects of their relationship via their transformations in these situation comedy settings. So yeah, this really helped turn my attitude around in terms of like, all right, I think I can actually make, like, writing their relationship work. I definitely wasn't interested in breaking them up or anything. It's just the main reason we haven't seen Cass and Noah go on dates and be a couple romantically, even if it's so much as just a short conversation about how much they respect and love each other, because I just don't feel like I write those very well. I don't like shoehorning that in where it's just like, oh, okay, get a room, you two, or that, like, we know they're in a relationship. Why did you bring that up now? Yeah. So, but this chapter, I'm like, I was looking forward to the least this chapter writing the relationship. But ironically, I feel like this is one of the better scenes in Phase 3. I'm not sure if you'd agree, but in terms of, like, what I was afraid the scene was going to become, struggling to write it in a totally different context and turning it into this sort of sitcom thing and driving forward their respective issues, I think it works great. I'm really happy with it. Juggling two plot lines. The Flint storyline here was originally going to be very brief, but I brought Argo into this. So I'll mention this. I just went on a huge tangent about how I structured the last page. So I've got a lot of stuff to say about Argo. I will save it for when we get to his main scene in a little bit. Suffice it to say, Flint was originally not going to be a strong presence in this chapter. We were going to see a little bit of him, but he was never originally going to go face to face with Argo. So the B plot changed a lot from my initial conception of this chapter. We were originally going to spend even more time at the Allium with Cass and Noah and Demetrius and Ash. But I took a couple of pages away from the Allium, gave a couple more pages here. I brought Mike in, which was a late addition to this chapter, but I was so happy with the way that it worked out. Like, I couldn't believe that I had left him out. I actually got to the point where it's like, I made a decision where I was like, wow, I should bring Mike in. And the minute I thought that and started writing his scenes with Flint, I'm like, why wasn't this my idea from the beginning? This is, like, we haven't seen Mike in a while. We haven't really seen a lot of Flint's domestic life, apart from, like, I want to live like a squirrel, my parents won't let me. But, like, he's got friends. He had a social life in school. So, like, how is that affecting him? So, things like this where his best friend is coming over for movie nights, like, that is super important for him. So getting Mike in here and giving Flint a more filled out B plot for this chapter was another way that that this chapter really improved leaps and bounds over my original intentions for it. So yeah, this was great. Why did I pick Star Trek Beyond as the movie they're watching? I'm a huge Trekkie, if you didn't already know that. And also, it's one of my favorite Star Trek movies. And I picked the scene where they're playing Sabotage, or they're about to play Sabotage, because I had made, when Star Trek Beyond came out, I made a review comic. I actually did a 4-panel black and white comic of Cass and Flint in character briefly reviewing Star Trek Beyond, and all Flint's doing in the background is running around going, listen all y'all, it's Sabotage. So this was a callback to that review strip that I had done. And if you're looking for it, it's not on the main UTC website. You can find it on Patreon, and you can find it on the Katomix DeviantArt gallery. It'll be there. Search my gallery for just Star Trek Beyond, and you should see it. So that's why I chose this movie for this. But it inadvertently ended up being another happy coincidence, because the dialogue leading up to them playing Sabotage helps go hand in hand with the fact that Flint hears Argo making noise outside. So that worked for this let's make some noise at the end. And then I'm like, all right, let's keep going with that then. So we got Mike being like, he's mentioning Ainsley, who's one of Cass's girl space friends from school. We saw her in Fur Will Fly along with Mike. But we have a little bit of a hint here that she's not as comfortable hanging out with Flint as she used to be, as a result of all the things that went down at the school and Flint's transformation. So we have Mike alluding to that, but also being like, oh, I'll change the subject. And then we have the character in the movie saying, loud and distracting, I've got just the thing. I think that's Scotty saying that. So all of this pairs together. Again, another little thing, another thing that I just sort of stumbled onto. I'm mentioning a lot of this stuff just to let you guys know how haphazard a lot of the construction of UTC is. As much as I like to talk about, all right, well, I had the idea for this, and I had the idea for that, and everything. Just as many situations or things where I'm like, we'll see how this goes. And then unexpectedly things change at the last minute, and it's like, oh, wow, that was even better than anything I was like painstakingly putting together before. That is the creative process, really. All right, this page is our first, this is our first look at the Allium. When it comes to, like, I wanted to make this place look really fancy. But I also wanted it to look kind of stuffy as well. So I increased the contrast of the lighting. We've got really harsh cast shadows on all the characters, and there's like fancy textures on the walls and stuff. I don't usually like to put textures anywhere because I'm a boring background artist. I've got to get better at that, and this is one way that I'm doing that. So we've got this obviously look slightly upscale restaurant look here. We got stained glass partitions. We got these nice lights, but I shifted the colors to this like mustardy color. There's a little bit of green in the yellow of the background coloring here. So it's like just this, it's this little slightly sickly yellow color. And that kind of sets the tone of like, this isn't the comfortable place that it tries to be. There's this slightly tangible ugliness to it, discomfort to it. I'm not sure, like, hopefully that translates to you as you read it, and different screens and devices are going to have different tints of yellow, so maybe you would see it, maybe you wouldn't. But it's like, it was a really subtle thing I was hoping to try and put in there to, from the very get-go, be like, this is not the, this is not the welcoming place that they're hoping it will be. Yeah, there were this is just like, how do I get these guys to do small talk and stuff, and just be in character and have some, have just how do I get them to date? How is dating for them? And again, I fell back, learning the lesson I learned with the car scene. I brought back in this, okay, they're just going to talk about their transformations, and they're going to talk about the animals that Demetrius and Ash are raising, and that stuff. And we're just going to organically develop a conversation. So that's where a lot of this dialogue came from. This line here, at the very least, if we never find a cure, you'll show the world that us animal people can still be beautiful. I probably spent about 20 minutes trying to write a better line, and I failed miserably. I just could not. I could not figure out how Noah could bring across this sentiment that the way you look may not be the way you want to look, but even if you can never look any different, you are beautiful. I see the beauty in you. And the line's meant to be kind of ignorant on Noah's part. Like, he genuinely is trying to compliment her, but he's also minimizing the fact that Cass is disgusted by her body. So ultimately, I gave up trying to write a really good line here, because the line itself is calling out Noah's imperfect compliment. So instead, I have Cass just go straight out and lampshade the fact that this line was coached. It was not organic. It's not something someone would just normally say in a conversation. It's really awkward. It's really weird conceptually. Like, are we animal people? We're humans. Cass thinks of herself as a human. So, yeah, this was my least favorite part of the script, and I did what I could to try to make that part of the plan all along. And be like, look, it's not a good line. Let's just acknowledge that. Noah's not being the most supportive boyfriend here. Alrighty. Just real quick, in terms of like storytelling, moving from one plot to the other, one scene to the other, the breakaways, each time we cut from one scene to the next, for the most part, it's to show time passing. So, like, I can skip some of the tedious or uninteresting or unnecessary parts of the conversation at the allium by cutting over to what Flint and family are doing at home. And then we can cut back and we're into a different phase of their conversation. Oh, I bring that up, and it's actually not the case in this particular cutaway, because this happens immediately after Noah says the animal people line. But still, that a few of the scenes in this chapter were done in that fashion. So for the most part, I had the scene break at points where I wanted to skip forward in time within an individual scene. So yeah. Giving Demetrius, like, one of the things about having the four of them having these conversations, like, Demetrius doesn't talk, so giving him ways to include himself in the conversation and be able to interact with everybody on equal footing was very important to me to bring across. So we've got panels where he's giving them gestures and they're answering him. And here, like, Demetrius and Ash are having their own silent conversation between themselves, being this awkward caught in the middle between Cass and Noah arguing. Well, it's more like Cass is just going off on a rant. So, like, for those things, like, giving them some chances, giving Demetrius and Ash some chances to, like, have conversations. And for us to see that they are very organically, like, they know each other really, really well. Ash has picked up Demetrius's gesturing language as if it's his own. So this is, like, this is a one way to show, like, how naturally they communicate with each other without words. All right. And then Cass delivers, like, the crucial line here. You've been helping a lot with the cure for Flint and me. Have you been spending enough time on yours? And that's pretty much the thesis of the direction that Phase 3 is starting to take here. And yeah, so bringing Mike into the story gave us this scene, being able to, you know, have Flint really state to someone that he trusts implicitly, like, what he's going through. Someone who's really truly trying to understand him, but also is trying to look out for him too, and worries for his safety and his well-being. There was a little bit, like, I could have done a better job depicting, like, the spatial orientation of the backyard. Some readers thought that this figure here was actually Flint. This is Argo. Flint has glided to a tree, and I could have had him glide, like, off screen in an upwards direction, but, like, he's gliding, he's not flying, so he's not gaining any altitude, so he was going to be naturally going in a downward direction. I could have angled a little bit better to indicate that he reached under this tree branch here in the foreground. It's very close to outside the window. But yeah, so Mike is actually looking over, not at Flint, who's, like, Flint, if you were looking at this panel, Flint's, like, over here. So yeah, this is a different character. The reason for the footprints here is because Argo had gone right up to that window, that living room window, and then tracked back. And here we get some of our first internal monologuing. We've had internal monologues in the past, very, very rarely. Cass did it for the first time in Chapter 4 when she's walking back into Attic High for the first time as a goat. And here we're really getting, like, the instincts and stuff. And this is a way to, like, instincts and facing the animal side of themselves is something that we're going to see a bit more in the next chapter when Cass turns into a full goat, and we hear her internal monologue. This scene brings this out. This is this introduction or reintroduction of the fact that Flint has these instincts that he's put. That's like a push-pull with them. Does he follow them? Does he not follow them? They're really put to the test here. it's a situation where he sort of, in the past, his gliding has saved the day. It saved the day, and it's a big world. It saved the day in class warfare. So, he's going to think he's indestructible. And it's immediately proven incorrect. So, yeah, we reintroduce Argo here. Because we've only seen him in one chapter a while ago, and he looks much different here, I wasn't sure exactly how Flint would recognize him at first. Then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. He's going to have a heightened sense of smell, so he's going to detect Argo based on his smell. But how do we communicate that in the page? So I drew Argo's original form superimposed here to clue us in, to be like, okay, this is like Flint's smelling Argo, and boom, he's got the picture in his mind. And then this is what he really looks like here. So now we'll talk a little bit about why Argo is even here. The original plan for Phase 3, there was originally going to be more, like, Argo was going to be the big bad of Phase 3. Which did not happen. Hopefully you read chapter 14 and you saw that Argo is not in it. The original plot line for Phase 3 was Argo was going to interrupt Cass's cure in chapter 14. And basically, he was going to go after Cass as a potential cure for his own genetic mutation, fluctuation thing. And I kind of had a vague idea for how that would work out. But the overall idea would be that Argo is trying to bring out, like, wild aspects of people. Being like, embrace the animal that you really are. Argo always had this idea of, Dr. Mitchell's a snake. He acts like a snake, so might as well be a physical snake, and things like that. So the plot of Phase 3 originally was going to be Argo has been stalking Cass and Flint this whole time. I foreshadowed that in Fur Will Fly when Flint loses that purple device that Noah made for him that alters his nanobots. He loses it in the bleachers, and it goes missing, and we never learn what happens to it. That was a way to keep Argo in the picture, because I expected at that time Argo was going to be this big bad that would recur in future issues and cause larger problems by, like, stealing what he could of any information about the nanobots that he could collect. And stealing that purple device was one way that he would learn how the nanobots work, and he could start bending that to his own ends. So originally, in this chapter, Argo was going to show up at the Allium. Cass and Noah would have left the Allium in that awkward moment when we're gonna get to that moment in this chapter in a couple of pages, but like they storm out of the Allium because there was a scene and they realized they were being discriminated against. They were being seated far from other people, so that the Allium wouldn't upset their other customers. So Cass is going to end up in the alley next to the Allium because she'd hear a noise or something. And that was Argo luring her into a trap. And he was going to try to kidnap her. Noah saves her. And they realize, oh, Argo is still out there and he's gunning for us for some reason. Why does he want me? I don't know, but that's a thing. And then in the next chapter, Argo was going to crash Cass's cure. Cass was originally going to be in a barn on Demetrius's property where he's got a large facility where he cares for all of his experimental animals. So they were going to originally set up this special room at Demetrius's place where they could keep Cass safe and monitor her as she turned into a goat and then ideally turned back into a human. And Argo was going to actually break into that barn and kidnap Cass. And that would have been the cliffhanger for chapter 14. The more I tried plotting it out and being like, all right, how does this alley altercation in chapter 13 work out? How does Cass get away from Argo? How does Noah rescue Cass from Argo? And then in chapter 14, they already, at that point, they'll have known Argo's coming after Cass. So why would Cass try this risky procedure? if she knows she's already in danger from this guy, like, why would she voluntarily be like, all right, look, we got this potentially lethal, dangerous animal man that's trying to kidnap me out there. Now's a great time for me to try to turn myself back into a human using this risky procedure that's going to leave me vulnerable for a couple of days. And then having her go into the barn, and like Argo just easily breaking, maybe not easily, but he like burst through the wall or through a window and break in and kidnap her. I'm like, everybody, like all of her friends are going to be there for her. They're going to make sure she's protected. So like I would have like had to contrive so many things to make it so that Cass can get kidnapped. And I looked at all of that and I'm like, this is really stretching it. And also, Cass has no agency here. It's a situation where Argo is imposing his will on her, where we've spent the whole series already with Cass's will being imposed upon by other people. First it's Morty, and then it's every other villain that's tried to start something at Attic High, including Argo and Ken. And so, like, Phase 3 was supposed to be about Cass taking agency back for herself, saying, okay, I don't know if I can get cured for real, but I'm going to do absolutely everything I can to get cured because I'm so sick of this. This is not me. This isn't the body I want. This isn't the life I want. And I need to change back. So Argo just being the big bad made no sense if I really wanted to make this story Cass's story. So all of those things considered, I threw out the idea of Argo being the big bad. And at that point I'm like, all right, well I've set up Argo as a recurring villain. He disappears he shows up and then disappears in chapter 5. He steals the device in chapter 9. There's no other hints dropped about him. We haven't mentioned him in like four issues. But he is a lingering plot thread that I'm no longer going to do anything with, but we've got to close the loop. And that's when I thought, like, okay, how about give Flint a bigger B-plot in this chapter? Instead of going after Cass, Argo goes after Flint, who is not only easier prey for Argo, but also his nanobots are the ones that the purple device that he stole were attuned for in the first place. So it makes more sense if Argo wants to learn more about how these nanobots work and manipulate them, go to, that's the easiest path to take. So having Argo show up at the house, especially while Cass is gone, one less person to protect Flint. So that way, Argo can fight Flint. Flint can have this situation that shows how overzealous Flint is, perceiving himself to be a hero squirrel, superhero, and also it helps us dispatch Argo and say, like, okay, here's Argo, he's back, here's here's what was going on with him, here's where those loose ends get tied up, and then write him out of the comic, at least for this set of issues, chapters. So that's the whole idea. And it was overall the impact of Phase 3 was monumental. It was a good change, but it took me a while to really convince myself to do it because how drastic of a change. I'm like, this would mean throwing out almost everything I had developed for Phase 3 at this point. And I'm in the middle of writing these pages, and drawing these pages. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm going to change it so that Argo shows up at Flint's place and tries to kidnap him instead. And the next few chapters of UTC are not going to have a big bad. I'm not going to force a big bad into the situation. I had to convince myself, and I finally did. I'm very happy that I changed that because once he was removed, a lot of the things that I'd hoped to do for these characters, a lot of their internal struggles, it now became completely focused on them. Cass is dealing with her problems, Noah's dealing with his problems or failing to deal with his problems, and other people are having to deal with them for him. Flint's got his thing going. Morty's got his thing going. It's all insular. So like that that ultimately was the final change to the arc of Phase 3 that put everything into place. And from here on, the next 3 chapters, the the main ideas are the same. The main concepts are the same. Cass's cure still went haywire. There was still an interruption. She's stuck as a full goat. Flint has still escaped from the house and ran off on his own. All of like the broad strokes of these characters' journeys still happen, but Argo isn't the one to instigate any of it. And he's not steering the chapter towards like a good versus evil thing versus a human versus animal thing, like a nature versus artificial humanity kind of thing. So it I'm sorry I'm rambling so much about this, but this was the crux. This is like this is a big thing to figure out at this stage. And it definitely has this really nice ripple effect for the rest of the series. Like, as readers, you're just reading the final product. You could have been reading a very different product had the story played out the way I had originally plotted it way back in 2015 when I was first laying out the pages and being like, all right, how's Argo gonna mess with everybody? I just, yeah, I don't like Argo. And I feel kind of silly for taking so long to realize, like, Argo's not a good big bad. There shouldn't even be a big bad for this chapter. But that's what it is. Sometimes you get so fixated on an idea, even if you're not super wild about it, you just think to yourself, well, this is the way it has to be. No, it doesn't have to be like this. If it's not working, change it. You're in control of your story. So that's how that went. All right, so yeah, going through the motions here. We've got all of this. Ash's hot-headedness comes out again here. I've been kind of flanderizing Ash a little bit. He's been getting more and more like short-tempered, hot-headed, impulsive as the series has gone on. And the reason for that is I hadn't originally established a really solid character type for him before. He's just sort of the 3-armed, later 4-armed guy who's just there helping out, and just jumping in to help things. So like, eventually I settled on the idea for his character of being this slightly brash, like intensely loyal, intensely caring for his friends, but kind of in a toxic way. So he is about to go off and yell at his uncle here. We see the modified version of the nanobot device that Argo had stolen before. The idea of the Callaways having a tranquilizer gun. This is a situation where this is one thing I couldn't figure out how to rewrite to make it better. If I was a better creative mind, I would have not written myself into a corner where this is the only thing I could think of. But like, I don't like the idea that once again, after 2 chapters ago, we had guns be the solution to stopping a rampaging Ken Telekin. In this chapter, a tranq gun is the device that stops Argo. Tranq gun's obviously less lethal than a real gun that shoots bullets, but I still like, can I get away from the projectile weapons? This comic is supposed to be about using weird, wacky, crazy DNA-altering science to solve problems. And I keep defaulting to firearms as the final, like, way to put the bad guy down. I'm really, really going to try hard not to make this happen again. This does not happen for the rest of Phase 3. We don't see any more firearms going off in Phase 3. So yeah, I'm trying to go back to the idea of, like, we're using other scientific methods to solve our problems. That's my gun PSA for this commentary. Ash's rant here was my attempt to make it show like he's trying to be an ally, but he's an imperfect ally. They're going to talk about this in the diner in a couple of pages. He is calling out, he's calling out, like, you know, how you're discriminating against my friends. I can't believe you would do this. But Cass is just being like, look, I don't want to make a scene. I like, this is just making it worse. Everyone's paying attention to us, like, for the wrong reasons. We just need to get out of here and de-escalate this. Yeah. Got nothing to say about this page. It just it does what it does, and I do like having Mike here to be emotionally supportive for Flint. All right, the diner scene. So the colors in very different from the allium. These are brighter colors. They are there's no cast shadows at all. Like, it's bright fluorescent lights. So, like, I barely even have any, like, I don't have any cast shadows here at all, actually, for this page. So, like, it's the idea of just this really bright, cool atmosphere. Very sterile, like, not as fancy as the allium, but somehow more comfortable. I hope that comes across. And not sure how many readers are familiar with my earlier works before UTC. This diner is a homage to an older series that I made while I was in college called 7 to 7 12-Hour Shift, which is a workplace comedy set at a diner. This is exactly that same diner. It takes place in a different universe, so it's not exactly the same diner, but everything looks almost the same. This here, this is the first page of 7 to 7, and this is what the front of the diner looks like. So we've got Cass and crew are seated, I think, right here at this booth, right off frame. Essentially, that's the booth they're seated at. So the counter, this section here, I redrew, and this is the owner, Barbara. She is drawn in here. So it's not the same diner because they're in a different universe than 7 to 7 was set in. 7 to 7 takes place in the same universe as my other series from around that same time, Unfamiliar Reflection. But this is the first time that it has ever been rendered in color. So this is partly just an Easter egg for myself. But any longtime readers, this is be like, hey, check it out. Remember this old thing? I can finally draw it nicely and color it. So yeah. Again, giving Ash and Demetrius a little bit more backstory as well. Long time coming. I really liked writing this like scene for them. We don't like get a lot of opportunities to really see like what, you know, how they interact, like what they see in each other and stuff like that. So and I actually originally I wrote this the anecdote Ash tells. I wrote that as part of one of the allium scenes, but there wasn't room for it. And I was like, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to cut it. I'll just make this the conversation they have in the diner later. So that all worked out. And this gag of Cass eating the plate, I have wanted to do this for almost the entire series run. Very happy that there was finally an excuse to do the paper eating gag. all right, and here's the page where we talk about being an imperfect ally, ways to get better at that, acknowledge that, okay, I didn't quite see things the way that you were. I had good intentions, but I realized how I was screwed up a little bit. I'm sorry about that. Dimitri's gesturing here, so I had really hoped that this came across like he doesn't use ASL because that's a language and he is unable to form sentences in any language. So he uses just a charades type of gesturing method. So what I tried to get across here, which didn't quite come across for everybody, is he's saying, you know, you ever need to, if you ever need validation, if you ever need to, you know, if you need an ear, I've got you. He's putting a fist over his heart. And he's telling him, like, look, I'm here for anything. Any your feelings, I'll help you carry them. I will lend you the support I can as I'm able. I'm skipping right over these pages because they're pretty self-explanatory. This scene was this scene warmed my heart to write and draw, because it's nice to give these siblings a moment to be together. And things might not be perfect, and there might still be some friction between the two of them, but they're more than they've ever had before. They are seeing each other for who they are, and understanding that they have different perspectives, and they're respecting each other's different perspectives. And given everything that they've gone through from the beginning of that chapter when they were having the argument about whether Cass should wear her hair long to now, it was good to write a companion scene that kind of that almost bookends this chapter and be like, here's where they're at now. And their sibling bond is unbreakable. The blank collar tag. This is something that, again, like the paper reading gag, I've been wanting to work into the comic for a long time. In fact, this was in Cass's original character design. The very first picture I drew of her in color is this picture right here. It's up on my DeviantArt gallery. Katomics on DeviantArt. This was originally Cass's first goth outfit. And she's got the black choker, and she's got a collar tag on it. And the idea of it being blank is she's... it's the same reason that she's got it in the comic. It's like she's not going to prescribe a label to herself. So the idea of this collar tag being on her choker was intended from the very beginning, but originally I thought, well, it's probably too much at the beginning of the series. I'm just going to give her a black choker, and I'll add the tag later. And then at some point, I had the idea of Noah giving it to her as a gift. And then I'm like, okay, that's great. I'll do that sometime in Phase 2. Maybe on their first date. He'll give it to her as a gift on their first date. And then they never ended up going on their first date in Phase 2. And I was like, oh, whoops. That got away from me. But I still want to introduce this collar tag. I feel like it's a very integral part to her character as someone who presented as a human. She presented as a goth, even though she didn't quite feel like a goth. She still wanted to stand out in some outrageous way within societal acceptance parameters. Weird way to word that sentence, but that's the way I've worded it apparently. The idea of her wearing a animal's collar, it still felt like, all right, maybe that's a bit too much as a human, but once she becomes an animal, she'll probably be like, all right, I'm going to embrace this aesthetic. And then when UTC really went the dramatic route and she just absolutely loathes her appearance, she hates being a goat, I'm like, well, okay, there's no reason she would really wear the tag then. She wouldn't want to call more attention to her animal traits. So I left it off for a while, and then I thought, okay, so Noah's going to gift it to her, but why would he gift it to her? And that's when I came up with this idea of she doesn't subscribe to labels. So that back in chapter 5, I Abomination, the first chapter of phase 2, I wrote a few lines where Cass says like she doesn't like being labeled a victim, she doesn't like being labeled a goat girl, she doesn't like all these like labels, she doesn't feel like she needs to, she hates the idea that she has to fit into a mold that other people expect her to fit into. And she doesn't want to broadcast a particular thing unless she herself wants to broadcast it. She doesn't want to be a goat. She doesn't want people to look at her as a victim of genetic manipulation from a sociopath. She wants people to see Cass. So the idea of wearing a tag that has no label is a way of putting that right out there and being like, look, I may appear to not be a human, and I'm wearing this animal collar, but it doesn't restrict me. Having a blank tag, I have the freedom to express myself however I want. There's no label thrust upon me, and I don't intend to act upon any particular label that you might thrust upon me. So that is what the collar tag represents. And having Noah give it to her, it's his acknowledgement of and callback to that label speech that she gave to him in chapter 5. She gives another version of that label speech to Noah at the Allium in this chapter to bring it back in to our short-term memory so that we could have this moment really meaningful. So that's what this is. And by including this, she finally feels like a complete character to me. She was created with these particular aesthetics, these particular ideas in mind, and they may have her physical look and those particular conceptual ideas, they may have changed over time as the story has matured, as her character's been more fleshed out. But the idea of having this blank collar tag has always been something that I felt was a very important thing for her character to have. And especially at this juncture in the story, she really feels like a complete picture now. So giving her this scene to end the chapter, and her going through and punching a hole in her choker so that she can wear this tag, like this brings her completely into focus. It gives her complete focus in terms of who she is and what direction she wants to take herself. And at this point, she is ready to make a very difficult choice, go through a uncomfortable ordeal, potentially life-threatening ordeal, but one that she is completely aware of. She's aware of the dangers, she's aware of the rewards. If it comes out well, she'll be cured. She has this idea. She runs it by Morty. He's going to help her, but he's not going to be the one to run the whole show. She's running her show. And finally, all of this has come together to make Cass Calloway everything that she is and will be. And yeah, I am really swept up in her story. I've been swept up, obviously, like, UTC wouldn't exist without her. She's the reason UTC exists. And for a long time, I've sort of been hesitating on telling the full breadth of the story. I've been distracted with, oh, this mishap's going on at school, or this is going on with this character, or whatever. But finally getting to this point, and like a voice in the back of my head's like, it took you long enough, Jim. But also, this is the best time for this to happen. It feels like the absolute right time for this to happen. for her to come together as a character. And now we're about to get into some really heavy stuff. She's going to have a life-changing experience. Whatever she is at the outcome of this of phase 3, whoever she ends up becoming, whatever body she ends up inhabiting, this is Cass. And she is the main character of her story. And Morty can't dictate that. Argo can't dictate that. So, tune in next time to see things get worse for a while as she descends into the most dangerous part of her plan to cure herself. And we will see how that all goes. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy listening to these commentaries and my ridiculous rants about the minutia of everything that goes into UTC. The next commentary is also going to be pretty deep because it's going to touch on some real, like, deeply internal stuff for Cass's character, for Flint's character. It's going to be a wild ride. I hope an enjoyable one, even if the characters themselves aren't really enjoying what they're going through. So please look forward to that commentary. I will close us out with one last ridiculously minute detail, which is right here on this page. And I just remembered after all this time. So this is Morty's phone number on her phone here. And it's a 555 number because that's what you do. You don't want to create a real number so that people don't start calling random folks. The rest of the number is a reference to Morty himself. Morty is named after Morty Maxwell, who is the villain in an old educational computer game called Midnight Rescue, which came out in the 80s. It was a DOS-based game, and one of my favorite games to play as a kid. And the game came out in 1989. 507, the number 5 is there were 5 ghost robot paintbrushes that Morty employed that you had to fight. I'm not making this up. The game's amazing. You can find it on archive.org, Midnight Rescue. Go ahead and give it a shot. It is super creative and it's just a fun way to learn how to critically read texts. it's a reading educational program. So there were 5 robots, and I was 7 when I first played the game. And so I that's where this phone number came from. And then, just for the heck of it, I'm like, well, what's the 507 area code? Where is that? I looked up the 507 area code. It's located in the geographical northern Midwest of the United States, which is where UTC takes place. I'm not saying that Genesee Springs, which is the town they live in, I'm not saying that Genesee Springs is in the 507 area code, but it's very close. So this is actually a plausible number that Morty could have on his cell phone. So it was just meant to be this random reference to the Midnight Rescue game, and it turned out to be, oh wow, the area code almost works. So, yeah, one other just silly little happy coincidence there. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I can't think of a way to end it, so I'll just end it. Please stay tuned for the Chapter 14 commentary. Take care.